Shivay, let's go on to web development now. So, how
Sure.
did you actually get started with web development, and what does a person need to actually focus on, and what does this learn and mean, and what are the best resources to look at?
Absolutely. So for me, I got introduced to the concepts of HTML, CSS when I was in my sixth standard, and at that point of time, like that was probably my first ever time looking into programming. Now, although we don't call HTML like a programming language, that's like one of the biggest misconceptions about HTML. So like I got introduced to it, but I was completely blown away because I was really young and being able to create these websites myself, because I was always going over and surfing on like internet, on playing games and all. So being able to create my own website was something that I really loved. But it was not until my ninth standard when I then started into JavaScript, and I actually liked creating front end development websites. And I used to participate in a lot of different, front end competitions, website building competitions during my high school. But I never really took it too seriously. It was only during my first year in college when I joined it that I truly got I dived deep into web development. And over the course of the next couple of years, I learned back end development, full stack essentially, and started creating websites like as freelance projects, as in during my internships, personal projects. So for me, like I truly got introduced to the huge world, right? Because even during my second year, I just used to think, okay, there is this front end JavaScript, jQuery. Sometimes you can use, like, let's say Vue.js. At that time I hadn't really worked around with React and all. So, and on backend you use PHP and you're done. Like, this is web development. But like web development is so much more than just PHP or just React. And if you go and look at the overall roadmap, right, it's like you'll be completely blown away with what all things you can actually do in web development, right? So it's a massive subject, and of course you can take years and years, and even then you cannot say that you'll know entire web development. But just for the sake of this podcast, the roadmap is sort of, I'll break it down into different steps. So the first thing is to be able to understand how does the web actually work, right? Just have that kind of understanding, because that will definitely help you out when you try to go on to understand more advanced topics. So just understanding how, like, web servers work, how websites work, right? So how the communication between server and your local browser that on which you're running these websites. So understanding of hostings, understanding of what exactly is the URLs that we have, how the URL redirections work. So these are like just some general not these are not specifically related to web development, but just these are some terminologies that everyone who is going into web development should know about again. So these are like just some basic computer science networking concepts. Now when it comes to the pure web development, first let's break down web development into three major aspects. So on a most high level, you have essentially three different layers that you have. So the first one is front end, the next is back end, and finally you have databases. So the front end is what you see when you visit any website. For example, if you go to facebook.com and you look at your entire current news feed, you look at your profile page, you look at all these different icons, like plus icon, like a plus icon, that is to create a new post, or you see all your different emojis, right?
Yeah.
So whatever is you're seeing on the front end, whatever you're seeing on the front of the screen, that is you're able to interact with, that is your front end, right? So whether it's like drafting a new message and all, so that is what you see on the front, like on your screen, that is the front end. Now you might think, okay, like when you're typing out a message and you're sending it to someone, the other person is receiving that message. So how is that process happening? So all of that is being handled on the back end. That is whatever processes that you see. So things like let's say if you're updating your profile picture, if you're changing your password, if you are creating a new post. So you might wonder, right, that okay, I'm able to see all of this happening in real time, but like how is it like getting processed? Because whatever changes or updates that you see to the front end, those are getting caused by the back end. And why do we call it the back end? Because you're not able to see that, right? Because all of that is happening behind the scenes. So that is what is the backend. And finally, you have your databases, right? So of course, all your user accounts that you have, your avatars, they're getting stored somewhere, right? They're getting stored in some space. They're not appearing like magically out of, out of somewhere.
Yeah.
So your databases are the ones where you have your all your information for every user getting stored. So it's usually stored in some kind of a schema, and that schema could be, like, let's say, there are different kinds of schemas that we can talk about, but essentially the front end communicates with the back end, right? Wherever, let's say, so let's take one use case, that is, you start off with creating, let's say, a profile picture. So you upload a profile picture. That uploading takes place on the front end, then it goes to your backend, and then from the backend there's a communication that takes place with the database, where the avatar, or like your profile picture, that gets stored to the database, and then you sort of receive a confirmation from the backend that you have successfully uploaded your avatar. So that is the way the communication works. So in front end, like, there are a lot of different things that you can start off with. The first and the most bare bones thing that you have to start off is by learning how HTML and CSS work, because HTML and CSS are sort of the building blocks of creating any kind of a website or like any web application. You start off with that, then you take up JavaScript. So that's like, JavaScript is language of the web. So you learn JavaScript, and how JavaScript is language that helps you control how these different elements, they interact on your web server or your web application. So your HTML or your CSS components, how do they actually interact, and they work on your website. So then you start learning JavaScript. And once you learn the basics of JavaScript, then that is when you will move on to, let's say, more advanced topics. Now you can pick up one of the frameworks in JavaScript. So that can include, learning, like, let's say, React. So ReactJS, or you could, learn Angular, you can learn TypeScript, you could learn Vue.js. So these are basically frameworks that are built on top of JavaScript, and these help you much more customization in the terms of like the projects that you're building. And today these are some of the most popular frameworks that come, to front end web development. Now the back end web development, you can use different languages. If you are looking to work in JavaScript, we have Node.js, then we have Dino JS as well. And if you don't want to work with JavaScript on the backend, you do have other kind of languages as well. For example, Python. In Python we have Flask, Django, or you could use Flutter, you could use Go as your language, backend language, or PHP. So there are a lot of different options for your backend languages that you can actually use. Ruby on Rails is also one of them. And of course, finally, you have databases. So you can either go with SQL-based databases like MySQL, Postgres, or you could go with NoSQL databases like MongoDB. So the difference that you asked regarding MERN is like Mongo, and then basically it's like MERN stack and mean stack, right? So we have M stands for Mongo, that is your MongoDB. E stands for Express, that is your Express server, that is like essentially the node, a Node.js, right? And then R is React, and N is Node. So like again, MERN stack is like one of the most famous technology stacks that like has the entire front end, back end, and database support. And similarly, like mean is Mongo, Express, Angular, and Node. So like you can either choose between these two for the kind of projects that you're building. And the best resources that I would say is that there are a lot of different good front end, like there's this site that you can visit, that is front end masters. So this actually you can get with your GitHub student pack. So if you're not aware of GitHub student pack, if you're a student, you can apply for it on GitHub. If you're a student, you just have to upload your email or like your student identity card. And front end masters, like, it's a wonderful course for learning about React, about front end concepts. And then you also have this really great YouTuber whose name is Programming with Mosh, and he is like one of the best developers, right? And if you definitely go through his YouTube tutorials on web development, you'll actually learn a lot. Apart from that, if you you can go to Udemy, and there's a really great course that is the Complete Web Developer Bootcamp, that sort of begins right from the beginning, from HTML, CSS, the concepts of front end, then you move on to back end databases, and you also make a lot of different projects in that. And obviously, if you are like a documentation nerd, which everyone should be, because everyone should be able to review documentation, because documentation is the best,
Yep.
then definitely do look at the documentation that you get on W3 Schools. It's a good site. And of course, the Mozilla, web development, documentation, that is definitely something that you should have a look at, because that is probably the go-to site if you want to really go deep into each of the concepts, because that is a really well diversified set of documentation that you can find. And probably the other things would be just the thing with web development is that you implement as you learn, right? You cannot expect to just keep on learning and not implementing. So my recommendation is that if you are getting started with web development, when you're learning a new concept, just implement it, right? Implement as you learn is
Yeah.
the go-to mantra, and like that will help you become really well versed with web development. So definitely.
So for a person who actually wants to build a strong resume in web development, how do you recommend they do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, see, the first and foremost thing is that whenever you want to put something on the resume, you should be good at it, and you should be confident enough that you will be able to answer any type of question, right? Because that is somewhat like students, they don't realize that, and when they apply for internships and they are having interviews, they might have just put in some of the concepts without knowing, and thinking, okay, like if I put more things on my resume, that would be better. And they end up like when they get asked questions about that, because see, the interviewer, they will assume that if you have put something on your resume, you know about it, right? And you end up like not knowing about it, and that creates a bad impression for you. So always do put up those things only on your resume that you know, and you're sure that you will do answer anything about them. And keeping that in mind, now when it comes to web development, of course, a good web development based in resume would be that you have created well diversified projects. So don't put like simple projects like a rock paper scissors game, right? Today, the need of how we're looking at web development, like the space has changed a bit. So if you're having like a full stack website, it's not like you're creating like a to-do list or like a social media type platform. Try to create unique projects that show a diversified skill set in your project, and keep the project hosted if possible. So for example, if you're using front end, if you're using a back end, if you're using database, so do mention that very carefully. And do try to make projects that are not some kind of coursework, right? Because usually what happens is that people, they just learn about some kind of a capstone project that you are doing when they are learning about web development, and they put it up, because those kind of projects, like interviewers are coming across such kind of projects every day.
Right.
So even if you are putting that kind of a project, have a unique take on it, right? Do try to create a project that is unique and has a well diversified set of skills that shows that the range of skills that you can do as a web developer. So do make such kind of impactful projects. Do take time, because even if nobody's telling you to add 10 projects, because of course your resume otherwise will be overloaded. Even if you do have 2 projects, they should be of high quality. And today I would specifically recommend that if you do use cloud services, because today cloud is actually becoming an absolute necessary part of each and every different company, right? So if you're using, like, let's say AWS hosting, you're using some kind of cloud services, do also use them, try to use them, right? Because DevOps, that is becoming a huge part of web development itself, right? So if you are using some kind of backend services, APIs, do mention that. And just showcase that, okay, showcase what kind of talent that you can have in that particular project, and make in fact impactful projects. That is one thing. Then of course, when it comes to internships, just mention, if, like, let's say if you have done like a web development based internship, do mention, don't just mention that, okay, you worked on this website. Do mention what kind of improvements or what kind of new things that you added that caused that website or that company to actually become better, right? Do mention about those statistics as well, because it's recommended that, like, let's say if you were working on the back end and you helped improve the performance of the server by 15%, so do mention that, right, that you helped improve the performance of the website by 15%. So do add those kind of statistics, what kind of things that you worked on, what technology stack that you worked on in that internship, or that job that you're working in that is related to web development. So that will also be very impactful. And of course, if you are, like, let's say making open source contributions, do mention about those contributions, because
Right.
some companies, they might actually appreciate, because a lot of different startups like Grofers, Zomato, they actually look out for people who are really actively contributing to a lot of open source. So that's also one thing that I'll hugely recommend to everyone.